Staff of hostels all around the world, what is the weirdest crap you've ever seen happening amongst backpackers? Story 1. This is going to be a bit weird if people didn't figure that out before coming into this thread. I've never worked in one, but stayed in them as I backpacked around South America. In Peru, after returning from a hiking trip with some new friends, we went to a local club and started having a great time. No inhibitions because nobody knew each other, so nobody was embarrassed to dance or whatever. I was pretty reserved as a kid, so this was a whole different side of me that I could let out with zero repercussions. This local girl was staring at me from across the dance floor, so I went over and gestured to her, asking her to dance. I spoke no Spanish, and her no English. We ended up dancing and drinking all night and having a really good time. As the night wound down, we stumbled back to my hostel, and I brought her into the large 8-bedroom dorm that I had rented, which was currently only occupied by me. We started making out and fooling around pretty quickly, and found ourselves naked on my bed. I was a virgin at the time, so I was pretty excited that this exotic Peruvian woman was going to bang me. I wanted to be cautious and not finish immediately, so I focused heavily on her, trying whatever I could do to please her before I got on with myself, and ended up going down on her as she laid across my bed. So there I was, butt naked, crouched on the bed with my head in her crotch and my extremely white butt in the air pointing towards the door, when the manager of the hostel walked in, leading a group of newly arrived backpackers that were planning on staying in the dorm I was occupying. This manager woman immediately started losing her crap, shouting at us, in Spanish mind you, so I have literally no idea what she was saying, and making a big shooing motion with her hands, as if she would fan us out into the street and purge the room of the evil deed that had been done. The new backpackers were just standing in the doorway looking in with no clue what to do. The only thing that I could do was make the same overly broad shooting motion towards this woman while shouting back in English. They eventually left and apparently found another room to occupy. We continued, had our night together, and my girl left in the morning. Checkout the next morning would have been awkward if I hadn't still been in the mindset of not giving a frick what people thought. She lectured me, I think, during the entire procedure and charged me double for having 2 people in the room. I can't be the only one expecting the girl to be the manager's daughter. Story 2. I'm not a manager of a hostel, just a traveler, but I have a few stories. I was in Kiev, Ukraine during Christmas and New Year's, and the hostel I was staying in was super informal and pretty much just an apartment with a lot of rooms that some guy put bunk beds in and rented out. The managers were partying every night, so it had that kind of frick it, get drunk atmosphere. New Year's Eve rolls around, and everyone is going out together for a pub crawl in the general direction of Independence Square. It doesn't go well. Nobody ends up leaving the very first bar in time for the New Year's countdown, except me and one other American guy. We drunkenly sprinted to Independence Square to be there before midnight and made it by literally 5 seconds. That's the last we see of the group that night. When we came back in the morning, 3 people were missing and pretty much everyone else ended up puking or crapping themselves. One of the 3 missing people walks in. He's missing his front teeth. They're just gone. He's still too drunk to explain, so he goes to bed. When he wakes up, he doesn't even want to tell us what happened. When he finally does, we find out he paired off with this moderately attractive Dutch girl, and they were heading back to the hostel to ring in the new year when she drunkenly tripped walking down some icy stairs to pass under the roads. I don't know why, but they use these underground passages instead of crosswalks in Kiev, and she grabbed this dude and took him with her. He, having not slipped and being drunk, didn't realize what she did until he's headbutting the steps with his face, thus completely chopping off his front teeth at the root. He ended up having to stay in Kiev longer than expected to get new teeth put in. Moral of the story, as much as getting crap-faced in Ukraine in the winter seems like an awesome idea, think twice and avoid stairs. Story 3. Last summer, this British guy came into the hostel, around 40-ish, acting a bit weird, asking people straight up about drugs and crap. He sits in the common area, muttering to himself, and across the table says to me that he ended the life of his friend and that the cops are looking for him, or some crap like that. Me and my friends ignore him and go out partying later that night, come back early in the morning and keep partying in the little outside area they've got. We're all still up and merry around 7 in the morning when this girl comes out to us crying, her face completely white, saying that she's been lying in bed, not able to sleep, and scared beyond her wits since midnight. Apparently, she shared a dorm with this guy, and they were the only ones occupying it. and the dude has his bed close to the door, so she would have to pass him if she wanted out. She said she went to bed early and was about to sleep when this dude came in and laid on his bed and started mumbling and ranting about some freaky crap, like he had this whole relationship going on with her, that he wanted her to come over to his bed and just cuddle, and then when she didn't, he was all like, "Why don't you love me anymore?" And then he imagined that they had gotten back together and just schizoid crap. This had gone on for over 8 hours, and she was so terrified, so didn't dare to move. We went up to him and tried to get him to leave, but he claimed that he couldn't move, that he had been paralyzed by some disease, and that we were all lying about this and that, and eventually the police were called and they removed him. It turned out he had a fake passport on him. Really weird crap. Story 4. Staying in a hostel in Wellington, I was woken up by a woman and a man screaming at the top of their voices. She had awoken to find this guy lying on top of her and screamed the place down, and he started yelling a split second later. When all the lights came on and everyone calmed down, we found that he had been on the top bunk and it had partially collapsed on one side, tipping him off onto her bed. She woke eyeball to eyeball with him and just let rip, while he was just trying to figure out what had happened and where he was when this woman started screaming right in his face. Poor guy. I've stayed in hostels lots over the past 6 or so years, and among many, this was simple but my favorite. In a 10-bed dorm in Coogee Beach, Sydney, all the guys we went out together got drunk and stumbled back and got into bed. We all chatted crap for a bit, then people started to drift off. Some guy had met a girl at the bar and arrived later with her. They thought they were quiet, but I was sure they were being so loud everyone was woken up too. Either way, I tried to ignore it while they made quick, loud, and noisy bottom bunk hostel whoopee. Once they were done, the room was silent. I still wasn't sure if anyone else had been woken up by them, till one of the guys, a scouter, simply said out loud, to break the silence, "Can I have a go next?" The poor girl ran out. Everyone was awake, and a good hour of laughing ensued. Hostels are great. You definitely see the worst and best in people. Story 5. I don't work at a hostel, but alas, my friend and I experienced this while staying at one. So, my friend and I traveled to Copenhagen in 2009 to see a concert, Metallica if you're wondering, and stayed at a hostel in downtown Copenhagen. So anyway, we were out partying late and get pretty drunk. The morning after, we wake up hungover as heck. My friend is a bit quicker out of the bed than me, and he proceeds to the common showers/changing room. When he gets to the door to the changing room, he opens it, and standing there is a pale, fat man, about 30 years old, completely naked in front of the mirror with one hand on his hip and the other one jerking furiously. My friend saying he has never thought one could spank the monkey that hard without breaking it. Note, this is about 10 to 11 a.m., so he was clearly into risky playing of the old skin flute. My friend then just stares at him for a few seconds because of slow reactions due to a hangover, laughs, then walks away. As my friend is walking away from the changing rooms, he hears the guy saying, "Sorry," in a really shameful voice. Later on that evening, my friend sees Mr. Wank sitting with his friends having some beers and laughing until he sees my friend staring at him and smiling. "I know what you did this morning, you dirty dog," smile. Mr. W then proceeds to stop laughing, looks down, and says nothing for the remainder of the time we sit near them. Poor mustard. Too long didn't read. My friend walked in on a guy wanking furiously in front of a mirror in the common changing rooms midday. That's the stuff. Story 6. Traveler story, not a hostel employee. A few years back, traveling through Europe, I met with a bunch of Paris locals on Xmas Eve in the bar of my hostel. Long story short, I end up having incredibly drunken whoopee time with a French girl on the floor in the middle of a 6-bunk room, totally occupied by Taiwanese and Indian students. I vaguely recall looking up and seeing all 5 other bunks with their sheets pulled up over their faces. Cut to a month later, I've done a lap of France and have one night booked in the same Paris hostel before I head off to Asia. I approached the hostel staff that I had befriended, offering cheese I had bought in Marseille. One guy said, "You're the one we had complaints about." Confused, I asked what they mean. He said, "On Christmas Day, all the Taiwanese students and Indian students complained that someone was doing a corn video in the middle of their hotel room. They also said they knew when it stopped because you climbed into bed and started snoring." We laughed a lot, and they gave me free beer because they got lots of hits on their website. I had a roommate in a hostel bring a girl back in the middle of the night. When they got too loud for me, I just got up and watched them from about 5 feet away. That worked better to put a stop to it than anything I could have said. Story 7. I was in Prague a few years ago, staying at a hostel, as high schoolers are wont to do. Me and my buddy had just gotten back from a night of drinking, poor decisions, etc., and were chilling in the lobby area when this Swedish metal band that was also staying at the hostel comes back, all of them absolutely poop-faced. The vocalist, who's this huge dude with long blonde hair, exactly what you'd expect from a Swedish metal band, is completely plastered and starts yelling, asking people to kick him in the head. Nobody really wants to do it, but he was being really aggressive, and eventually he puts his head down on this table, and one of the other dudes in the band, I think the bassist, starts kicking him in the head, as requested. Like hard freaking kicks, right in the skull. After each kick, the dude yells to do it again. After 3 or 4 kicks, the bassist stops because his foot hurts too much, and they all go upstairs and pass out. I saw them all the next day, and the vocalist was completely fine, with no ill effects other than being hungover. The bassist, however, broke his freaking foot on this dude's hard butt head, and had to go to the hospital. Too long didn't read, Swedish metal band at a hostel in Prague engage in some drunken masochistic behavior, hilarity ensues. This gives new meaning to the word metalhead. Story 8. A few years back, I stayed as a backpacker in Vienna, Austria for a few nights. Last night, I had a new bunkmate, and she seemed like a lovely girl. So I go out, get blackout drunk, and awake at 5 a.m. in my top bunk to the unmistakable sound of people doing it in the shower. A few minutes later, the girl brought her friend out and hopped into the bed under me. Several come inside me, and your dong is huge, ensue, and as I'm violently bounced around on the top bunk, feeling sicker by the minute. My bunkmate then calls out another man's name, and is soon joined by a second young buck, and the party below me becomes a threesome. This continues for another 20 minutes, while I am bounced around the loose bunk some more. Eventually they finish up and the guys leave, giving me the chance to escape to the bathroom and spew. When I return, the girl says to me casually, "Don't suppose you'd want to ride too," or something to that effect. I politely decline and proceed to return to the bathroom and fall asleep in the shower. Too long didn't read, chick in bed below me rides the tricycle as I awkwardly ponder my escape. Should have given her a ride, bud. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 9. Worked in a party hostel in the middle of Melbourne for a couple years. I've seen some crap, man. Our hostel had 3 bars in the building, one of which was open 24/7. Happy to elaborate, but in short, I've seen the following. A gorgeous Swedish girl in nothing but a G-string stroll into reception and ask for another key for her room. A Scottish guy on ecstasy run half a marathon. An off-duty army guy drops his pants, sits on a futon, and proceeds to crap on the futon and pee all over himself. An otherwise quiet and reserved Korean girl getting fisted in the middle of a bar. A 40-something divorced mother of 3 in the middle of a 6-guy sandwich. Multiple corn-style scenes in full dorm rooms. And a lot of other crap I can't remember. It was a crazy couple of years, and even now I look back and think, wow, did that crap really happen? Oh, forgot my favorite one. A German dude comes to reception and very calmly explains that a homeless man is in the stairwell abusing guests as they walk up and down. I went to investigate, and it was the manager of one of our bars. Story 10. I've never worked in a hostel, but I've stayed in loads. I always remember this one guy in Warsaw. It was quite a big hostel, but despite it being summer, quite empty. So I was in a room of 8 beds, and it was me, this guy, and a couple. On the first day, I walked in the room to find him grappling the ceiling as if he was Spider-Man. I didn't notice him at first, but then he thudded to the ground and acted as if nothing had happened. He repeated this trick a few times, and I saw him walking around the hostel as if he was a kid trying not to touch the floor, clambering on stuff and the walls, etc. When I woke up the next day, he was outside in the courtyard doing a cross between martial arts and some kind of yoga wearing a toga. When I got back that night, he was singing on Skype. I also noticed he was reading a book purely about squirrels. I was there for 3 nights, and I think he spent his whole time in the hostel doing crackpot things. He's just your regular Polish man. Source: I'm Polish. Story 11. I was working for accommodation in a hostel in Australia. This strange family stayed for a few nights. Really fat woman and nice, but clearly crazy Kiwi guy. He showed us cuts on his arms, legs, and torso that he had given himself so that in a fight, if someone pulls a knife, I won't panic or react. Anyway, on their second night, they all got very drunk and have a huge argument. We hear a smash and head through to the lounge. The woman has smashed a table and chairs and is now semi-consciously peeing herself on the floor. So a few of our female friends, who are staying in the same dorm as her, wake her and try to get her to bed. But wait, there's more. The next morning, the girls tell us how the woman was up all night, talking. It turns out that the argument had been with the Kiwi guy, who was her nephew, and also her lover. Too long didn't read. Fat woman pees herself after a fight with her nephew/lover. Tell the Kiwi guy that not reacting is not a good reaction to getting a knife pulled on you in a fight. Story 12. I worked at a party hostel in Budapest. In my time there, the card game Poophead became very popular, and eventually people raised the stakes of the game. A stake would be decided at the beginning of the game, i.e. loser has a shot of the winner's urine, and whoever decided to play committed to suffering if they lose. Initially, the stakes were relatively tolerable. Loser gets a piercing in a place of the winner's choice. Loser shaves off an eyebrow. Loser gets winner's initials tattooed on their bum, etc. In my time observing, I was never game to play. I witnessed a guy, the winner, vomiting on the loser's head. The same guy lost the following 2 days and had to lick the winner's bum and snort the winner's semen out of a shot glass. The same guy won for both those games. It didn't seem so fricked up at the time, but in hindsight, it was a very strange way for young travelers to be spending their days. Story 13. Not staff, but a hostel attendee. In Prague, we stayed in a hostel with a bar that liked to serve absinthe and Red Bull shots. Think Jaeger bombs. One guy, who we'll call Bluto, liked Animal House. Decided he'd go for the record of most A-bombs in one night. Something like 16. I'm fairly sure he made up this record. We all went to bed on the 3rd floor and figured the night was over. I woke up later from a dream of someone screaming, which turned out to be real. The lights were on and the whole dorm was awake, thanks to A-bomb guy lying on the ground with blood pouring from his head going, "Get fricked!" He fell from the top bunk. They heard him in reception on the bottom floor. Somehow I slept through it. He also wet the bed and did it in the hallway and spent the rest of the night screaming, "Get fricked!" at his brother. Story 14. Not hostel staff, but lived in a big hostel in central London when at university. Had a lot of fun there and saw the weirdest things during the time I was living there. By far the strangest of all is related to this girl who was very introverted and lonely, didn't really talk to anybody in there, and had the weirdest behavior. One day there was a commotion in one of the floors because she was all covered in blood and weak, walking like a zombie along the hallways, near the toilets and shower rooms. To make a long story short, she had just given birth to a baby in one of the shower rooms and nervously kept telling everyone that the baby wasn't hers. In came the police, as in other occasions, and social services, and that was the last we saw of her. Dude. Story 15. I was the new guy at the time, so I got stuck cleaning the bathrooms. Upon entering the men's room to do my rounds, I hear a man having what sounds like the most painful crap of his life. I carry on and go about my work for the next 15 minutes, and he still isn't out yet. Right as I'm about to ask him if he's all right, this big jolly Brit walks out of the stall with a handful of condoms filled with mystery drugs. He looks me dead in the eye, says, "Singapore, mate," and walks out solemnly shaking his head. In Singapore, if you get caught with drugs, you can face the death penalty. Story 16. I was working the night shift, and basically everything was quiet. All of a sudden, this weird little guy comes to the reception and tells me he needs 2 new mattresses. Why? Because he wet his bed. To be honest, it happens more often than you might think in hostels. I say no problem and ask him why he needs the second one. He goes, Then another guy comes down the stairs looking peed off. And he actually was. He was in the bottom bunk. He woke up because of the pee dripping on his face. Story 17. So a friend of mine peed himself on the top bunk in a hostel in Melbourne. The pee then managed to flow through the thin mattress to a couple doing it below. He woke up to an angry Irishman yelling at him. He told him you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, rolled over, and went back to bed. He was forced to steam clean the mattress in full view of everyone the following day. The pee was later described as coming down with the force of a waterfall. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube? I laughed. I'll be sure to use this one at work. Story 18. I manage a hostel in America, and nothing surprises me anymore. I've seen people walking around the halls naked, people falling downstairs drunk, the usual stuff, you know? But there was one French guest who was sober as he had just checked in. I get a call from the business below the hostel saying someone is peeing out the window. I ran up to catch the guy, and he honestly thought it would be all right to do that. He swore that in France, that's what they do. Needless to say, we kicked him out. Just got back from France, they don't do that. Story 19. While staying in a hostel in Australia, we ran a bus shuttle from the hostel to the town center. One night, we get on the bus, the driver starts it up and proceeds to drive like Keanu Reeves in Speed, bombing down the road in the opposite direction to our destination. After 5 minutes of fearing for our lives, we ask him what's going on. The guy stops the bus and at this point informs us that he is in fact not our driver. He was just some random drunk guy that fancied a joyride. Grand Theft Australia. Story 20. Staying in a hostel in London that had a hot tub on the roof. Middle of the night, we hear what sounds like rain. Being from Oregon, I assume it is exactly that. Until the lights turn on and everyone is swearing and freaking out. There's a solid stream of water coming down the doorway and wall. Turns out someone turned a hose on to fill the hot tub and proceeded to pass out, allowing the water to flood through the building and our room. Got a free pint out of it, though. Story 21. I used to process the comment cards for the National Office of American Youth Hostels in Washington, D.C. Part of my job was passing on the info if they got any comments that needed to be investigated. We had multiple cards from one hostel that said things like, all of the staff here are on too many drugs to function. It's totally filthy and there are rats. This hostel was in Florida. I never found out what happened. Story 22. At a hostel in Amsterdam, an Australian guy named Steve-O, incredibly drunk by the way, threw himself face first down the stairs. At the bottom, he got up and yelled to us, "Now that's how you go down the stairs." So many of these stories involve Aussies. Story 23. I don't work at a hostel, but I was in one once in Venezuela when I saw 3 people laying in a row, arms by their sides and legs straight out, each with a small dog sleeping on their face. I still have no idea what the F that was about. Too strange to be made up. Story 24. A friend of mine worked the front desk at a hostel to pay for his room when he was in Australia, and by all metrics, he was good at his job. But they had to fire him when they found out that he was selling acid over the counter. I think you mean under the counter. Story 25. At a hostel in Vietnam, I saw a drunk Danish guy slip off a table on a stray ping pong ball, dislocate his shoulder, and pee himself. At breakfast. Superb viewing. A stray ping pong ball in Vietnam is likely to be very slippery. Story 26. I love that these stories are 80% by Australians or about Australians. Go to sleep, you mustards. It's nearly midnight on Sunday. Oh, can't sleep here, mate. The poisonous things will get you. Oh, the mother-freaking wombats. Story 27. One guy took a dump in a small garbage bin in a 10-bedroom while everyone was in there on Christmas. He was drunk. At least it was a garbage bin and not some shoes. Story 28. I used to manage a hostel in Mission Beach, Australia for 4 years. I saw a couple doing it in a hammock while standing up. Must have been surfers. Story 29. I lived in a backpackers hostel in East London for 4 months. It was actually really uneventful. No bullet holes, rampant traveler banging, or inconvenient kidnappings. I feel as though I missed out now. Story 30. People really should include the name of the hostel and a link to their reviews on the hostel worlds. I really want to visit some of these places. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.